Hello, London's calling. So I'm Sean Dukes, CEO of Learn Smarter Apps, and I'm here today to talk about dynamic forms. Now, I've worked with Salesforce for more than 10 years, and I honestly think that dynamic forms is one of the best features for admins that Salesforce have released. And when you think about it, that sounds a bit crazy. After all, what is a dynamic form? Well, it's a way of putting fields on a Salesforce page. And you're kind of thinking, that's the best feature Salesforce have ever released? Come on. But it does show you a little bit, I think, about how bad things were before dynamic forms came along, which is a shame because the feature at this moment in time is only half finished. It doesn't work with standard objects. It doesn't work with mobile devices. It doesn't work on communities. So there's still some way to go. There's also some kind of little tricky things that can trip you up a little bit. So we're going to look at some of those in the demo. But maybe I'm being a bit unfair because there are some really, really cool things about dynamic forms too. Some really great things you can do to essentially encourage users to create better data. One of our jobs, perhaps, as an admin, is what we're really doing is we're controlling the way people create data. After all, if creating data is a difficult thing to do, then you're going to get less data, and the data that you get is going to be of worse quality. So our job as the admin essentially is to set that interface so that when people are creating data, they have a great experience doing it, and it's easy and they understand it and all that kind of stuff, which is interesting because if you look at a definition of what a user experience designer does, that is exactly what a user experience designer does. Now, many of you will know Gemma Blizzard, Salesforce MVP, one of the co-founders of Ladies Be Architects. So Gemma's been telling us for years that we're architects. Well, guess what? Now we're UX designers too. How cool is that? So I think without further ado, it's probably time to get into the demo. But before I do that, I just want to introduce you to the data we're going to be using in our demo so that it makes a little bit of sense, okay? So this being London's calling, we normally have pies. Now, we can't be there to have pies in person, but we can have pies in our demo, right? So if we just look at our little data structure here, I've got a pie at the top, which is essentially what kind of pie it is, like a chicken and ham pie, a mushroom pie, you get the basic idea. And then we have a recipe for that pie. And then the other objects I'm going to play around with something called a pie batch. So this is like a supply chain traceability app. And what we want to do is we want to have high quality pies. Now, the thing about this is that the relationship between these objects is slightly different. In this first one here, the pie and the pie recipe, it's a fairly classic master detail, and that works brilliantly for me here. But the next one is not. So pie recipe to pie batch is not a master detail because it can't be. Essentially, I want to do sharing at the batch level because I have different teams working on different patches and stuff like that. So I can't have a master detail. Also, there might be too many records as well. I can't have a master detail. But what I do want to do is I want to create a master detail-like experience for the user, because I think you're going to end up with better data if we do it that way. So we'll have a look at how dynamic forms can actually help us to do that. So without further ado, let's get into our demo. Right, now I'm going to switch between my not quite my screen and my actual screen, which confuses me, but here we are. So there's our demo. Now, one other fun thing that Salesforce do that you kind of need to know about is that when you're working with custom objects, they've sort of put this little fun thing in where you can change the page to your heart's content and you can save it and you go back and look at your page and nothing has changed. And that's because there's a setting called caching that you can turn off. So the very, very first thing I'm going to do is turn that setting off. So I'm going to just go here into the session settings. This is an interesting page because for whatever reason, Salesforce decided to build it upside down. So it comes in at the bottom, you have to scroll up to the top, and there's this little thing about enabling secure and persistent browser caching. By the way, of course, you're doing this in a sandbox, aren't you? And then I don't know why there's no save button at the top. We go all the way back down to the bottom and then save it. And that will make your life a whole lot better. Right. So pies. We're going to start with the pie recipe, and we're going to start by looking at a specific pie recipe here. And what I want to do is, this is a standard page before we've done any kind of dynamic form stuff. You can see we've got, the page doesn't look too bad. It's pretty attractive in Lightning. It's a bit kind of messy. I'd like to sort it out. So if I want to sort that page out, what I actually have to do is go into the object manager, go into the recipe object, which is here. And then, and this is how you used to do it, obviously before dynamic forms came along, go into that page layout, come into the layout here. So I'm almost like going back in, it feels like I'm going back into Salesforce Classic. And to be honest, when I started working with Lightning, it was just didn't make any sense. It just didn't really connect. And it just felt so hard to do this. Now it seems like second nature, but it still seems a very odd thing to do. Anyway, I can kind of drag stuff around here and make it look a bit simpler. So what I want to do is I want to get the instructions and pop them down there. And some of this profit and loss stuff, I'm going to stick in a different section just to make it look a bit easier. So this is like the old way of doing things, and that will probably do for now. I'm also going to make these sections visible just because, and we'll do the same here. And then I'm going to save this. Okay, so that's done. Now I'm going to save it and go back to my page and refresh it. Now, if you hadn't done that caching thing, you'd be kind of having worried now because your page wouldn't have changed at all. But now we've done it, our page, so it kind of looks a little bit better, a little bit more sensible. I'm happy with that. What I'm not so happy with is when I go to edit it, one of these fields here is a multi-select pick list. And to be honest, it looks horrible because everything kind of goes all over the place. This field gets pushed up and everything, and it doesn't really work. So I can move stuff across, and I can edit stuff or whatever, which is great. And my page updates, which is great. It's all really cool. But that kind of edit it doesn't really feel very nice. So this is where dynamic forms come in. So what I'm going to do now is I don't have to go to the setup screen now. I just come in to edit the page here. And what you'll see, if I click it properly, what you'll see, if I click properly now here, is I'm now looking at my page. And when I click on my traditional page layout, the first thing I notice up in the corner here is a little button that's begging me to upgrade it now. So I'm going to do that. Let's go ahead and have our first dynamic form. So I'm going to upgrade it now. We get this introductory page. To be honest, you're going to get quite bored seeing this. So I'm not going to show it again, but I'll show it the first time. And then I want that pie recipe layout, and I'm going to click finish, right? And there it is. And it's like, well, hang on a second. Half my fields have disappeared. What happened to all the rest of them? And we'll talk about this in this, well, basically we'll talk about it now. So when you're using these dynamic forms, Salesforce have a thing called an accordion, and for some reason they think it's a really good idea for you to use it. And I think it probably is if you've got like 100 fields. Accordions might make your pages, they'll make it more efficient to load. But to be honest, if you've got a few fields like I have, I don't really find that accordion very helpful. But let's just save it and have a look anyway. So we'll save it and come back and look at our page. So, and I always get really impatient here. So you've got to wait till that save goes back blue again, or you get a sort of nasty message. Anyway, there we go. So save it and come and look at my page. And you'll see that all the other stuff has gone down into this bottom section. You've got to click it. I'm not really a fan of this accordion thing. What I do like, though, is when I go to edit this, you'll see our multi-select pick list now. It doesn't push all the fields out of line. And essentially, that page to me looks a little bit better just as it is. But I think we can do better. So let's see if we can do better. The first thing I'm going to do is get rid of that accordion. Right, so back into the page design. And the first thing I'm going to do, so what I could do, and I've done this before, and it's really tedious, is I could drag all of these things out, right? Drag these sections out and get rid of them one by one. But actually, you can just get rid of the whole accordion just like that, which is much simpler, and get rid of this mobile thing, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the record detail section back on there, which actually takes us back to where we started. Now I'm going to do the same thing again, upgrade now, but this time I'm aware of that little accordion checkbox. So I'm going to uncheck it, get my thing, click finish, And to be honest, I think I get a better result straight away because I can see all my sections on the same page, which is great. So that's really, really good. Now let's kind of calm down a bit, slow down, and have a look at how these forms actually work. Because what you'll see is up here on the left, you've now got a new tab called Fields. If you click on there, you'll see you've got sections. So if you want to add a new section onto your page, you can drag it in. You've got your fields. You could just drag those on your page wherever you like. And pretty much that's it. So you can just drag the fields onto the page. You no longer have to go into something that looks like Salesforce Classic just to change around the way the fields work on your page. And that's good, it's progress, but there is more. So we want to do now, go from just simply organizing our page a little bit to doing some slightly more interesting things. And that comes in when we look at the visibility. By the way, just before we get there, I want to talk about these universally required fields. So in this case, I've got some fields that for whatever reason are universally required. They have to be on my page. If they're not on my page, I cannot edit and I cannot save that record, which is interesting. And we'll come on to something a little bit later about how we can play around with that. But basically, they have to be on my page, right? But anyway, I can play around with stuff. So I can just move stuff around. So I might move a field around like that. These symbols, maybe I want them to appear at the top of the page, or maybe I want them to appear in a new section. That would be cool. So let's do that. Let's put a new section in and let's make those symbols appear in the section. I want them to appear up there on the right. And I can change the name of this section. It's kind of tricky because you click on it and it disappears. Click on it back again and it comes back. But I actually just want to change the names and just call it symbols or whatever. And then I could save that, and that's cool. But what's really interesting is when you start to play around with the visibility. So if I click on something like these dietary symbols, I can set the visibility by adding a filter, right? So my filter, essentially, I only want to show the diet symbols, perhaps, if there are some diet symbols to show. So what I can do is I can look at the fields, and this shows you the fields that are on there. Now, because that dietary symbols is, I'm collecting those with a multi-select pick list, it's quite difficult to, you can't basically create a formula based on that multi-select or a criteria based on that multi-select pick list. What I've done is I've got a cheeky little formula in there, which is called has dietary advice. Actually, I don't really need it on the page, by the way. I've got a cheeky formula in there called has dietary advice, which looks and sees if there's any value in there. And if it is, it returns true. And if there isn't, it returns false. So now when I go to add my filter in, I'm going to say, I only want to show this if have dietary advice is true. And I can click done like that, and then I can save it. So that's cool. So I can save it like that. And now let's go and have a look at that page then in real life. So here's my page. I've changed a little bit, and I've got some symbols up there. Basically, if I edit this and I take these things out, right, like so, and then save it, then that field will go away. Personally, I actually think it'd probably look better if I stuck it up here in the compact layout. I'm not going to do that, but that's probably what I do. I probably wouldn't show it in here. But you've got that idea of being able to show fields and not show fields depending on the value of other fields. And if you can't get to those fields, then sometimes a multi-select pick list is your friend. So that was really cool. By the way, one really good thing about these dynamic forms, I think, is the way those multi-select pick lists work. I'm quite a fan of multi-select pick lists. I know they're not very fashionable. I know people hate them, but I think that's partly down to how they look and the fact that they look and work so much more nicely in these dynamic forms, I think is one significant advantage, maybe a good one. Right. Now, the next thing I want to talk about then is record types. I don't actually have record types in my pie recipes, but I do in my pies. So if I go to create a new pie, I've basically got two record types. I've got a standard pie and I've got a seasonal pie. Because if I'm going to create this standard pie, you'll see there's some fields here, like when it's first available and when it's last available, that only apply to a seasonal pie. They don't apply to standard pies. Now, traditionally, what you do to handle this is you would create different page layouts and you then assign those page layouts to different record types and different profiles. And to be honest, it can get really, really messy and really confusing. And the great thing about, or another great thing then about these dynamic forms is you don't have to do that anymore. So let's just have a look at how that works. So I'm going to cancel this, right? And go and look at a pie, the spicy bean mix. Go and look at a pie and then look at the layout of this page again. So this time we're going to look at this with the view to working with record types. So what I've got then here is I'm going to obviously upgrade this to a dynamic form. So let's just do that quickly. So we're going to upgrade that to a dynamic form, get rid of that, have one of those, click finish. And that's cool. So there's my dynamic form. And these fields here, I can filter out. Now, if you look at the filter, at first, it's not very obvious how you do that, because when you look at the choices you're presented with, record type is not there. However, if you go into advanced, and then you click the select thing, you can select the record, and you can select the record type, and you can select the record, the name. Okay, so we can have the record type name or the thing. Don't forget the record type name, by the way, would be the API name, and that would be the label. So we're going to use the API name. Done. And basically, I only want to show these. So this is when we're going to see this. I only want to show this when it equals C, and I hope I spell this right. So seasonal, sorry, get nervous here. Seasonal pie, right? So is that right? I think that's right. So I'm only going to show this when the record type is seasonal pie. Do exactly the same for that one as well. So go into advanced, select record type. Name done equals that, done, save, boom. Okay, so if we come back here now to our page, we should see, if we go to create a new pie, right? So I'm going to go for create a new pie. If it's a standard pie, I don't see those fields, which is great. If I go create a pie and it's a seasonal pie, I do. Okay, so that's really, really cool. So you can get rid of all your record type page layouts. And to be honest, we've done that and I think it's great. I really hated those things. Apart from anything else, they're really difficult to deploy, all sorts of other issues with them. So if you can get rid of all your record type page layouts, in my view, that's a really good thing. One thing that's less good, I think, here is that down at the bottom of the page here, you can see this system information. We're trying to create a great intuitive user experience. Why does the user need to see that? I don't want to see that. Why? I just don't. So can I get rid of that? And the answer is, well, maybe, or even a bit. So let's have a look at how we can get rid of that. So again, what I've got here is this record. Yeah, let's just go into the design and have a look. So let's go and look at the page design again and have a look at this page, because those are in a different section. So we had a look earlier at how you could apply visibility at a field level. You can also apply visibility at a section level. But the point is here that so I'm going to have a filter in here. Again, when this record is new, it doesn't have a name. Okay, the name is empty, but it's difficult to test for that within the available things. However, again, I created a cheeky little formula that basically says if the record doesn't have a name, I'm going to say it's a new pie, right? And so basically I want to show this when the record is not new. Okay, so I want to show when the record is not new. So I'm going to just click done there and see if this works. Hopefully it's going to work. Save that and then come back and have another go and see what happens. Right. So the this is good. This is good. So it is there. But if I go to create a new one, right? So we go to create a new pie, and it doesn't matter what kind of pie we create, you can see that that section at the bottom now disappears, which I think is better because I just want my user to see the fields I want them to see and whatever. And I probably, if it was my app, I would actually put the owner down in the section I couldn't see as well. So I don't want them to see that. I just want them to focus on the things I want them to create. Okay. So far so good. Now, one problem with this Do you want? So we're going to have a, I don't know, pork pie, right? I'm going to save that. So the one problem with this, and I think it is a problem because if you think like I do anyway, is that when I click edit, I can't get rid of that section now. So there doesn't seem to be any way that I can get rid of this section when I'm editing the record, only if it's a new record, which is a shame. To be honest, such a shame, I think, that I've actually created an idea, which I put on the idea exchange or the idea, whatever. So you can have a look at that and vote for it if you like, about how we could actually make some of these things only visible when you're on display mode and not visible when you're in edit mode. But anyway, for now, we put up with it like it is. So that's where we are. So that's pies done. That's record types. Hope this is all making sense. So the next thing then to look at, we're going to go down to the pie batches now and have a bit of fun here, because this is the one where essentially I've created a, yeah, and sorry about that guy on the screen there. I think that's Bob Dylan. But anyway, I've created, this object has lookups. I should get rid of that because it's really distracting me. But anyway, I should get rid of that. This object has lookups. That doesn't help me at all. To a field, but I want it to behave like a master detail. So we're going to have a look at that. But first, let's sort out this dreadful thing over here. So let's see if we can do something about that. So what I've got is I've got a formula essentially, and this, to be honest, is just for a bit of fun. I would never, ever, ever put something like this in a real app. I'm just doing it just for you. But I've got a formula here that essentially shows different gifts depending on their hygiene audit. So we come and have a hygiene audit here. And basically, unless the hygiene score is 90 or above, that batch will fail and have to go in the skip. So, and this will show you that. So basically, if the hygiene score is greater than 90, you'll get a different thing. Now, I'm not using a dynamic form for this. I'm actually using a formula. But let's just get rid of this bit first anyway. So let's upgrade this now to our dynamic form. Don't want an accordion. Let's go. Finish it. Okay. And so the hygiene results in there. At least things are a bit calmer now. I'm not seeing that thing constantly flashing up at me. But what I do want to do is I only want to show that hygiene result if there's been an audit, right? And basically the way that it works is that these audits are random. If the hygiene score is 0, then there is no hygiene result. So basically, I only want to show the hygiene result if the score is more than 0. It could be, and if it's obviously more than 90, it's a pass. If it's more than whatever, it's a fail. So we're going to add that filter on here. So I only want to show this if the hygiene score is greater than 0, right? Which seems pretty cool. So that kind of works for me. And I'm going to save it, come back to the page, and hopefully things look a little bit calmer. Okay, eventually when we get there, yeah. So it all looks a bit calmer, which is great. The problem is, and this is a problem here, is that when I click edit, and it's actually a problem because of my score, but basically I change that formula, I stick it up to 5, let's say, and then it suddenly shows my result, and which is fine if it's 5, but what if it's 95? That's actually a pass, and it's showing me a fail because the formula is wrong. So this is just like a little thing that you could catch you out. And again, I'm creating a little bad experience for my users. Now, again, I said I'm never, ever, ever going to do this, but I am going to improve the experience a bit. So when I save it, then I get a much more positive, obviously, result. But still, it's not a great experience. I'm going to show you a little way you could just fiddle this, but this is really just for a bit of fun. So let's have a go at that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of that hygiene result completely. So let's take it off the field, off the page. And I've created 2 new formulas, one of which shows the positive image and one of which shows the negative image. And this is just some more kind of interesting edit time. So what I've got is those things saying, so it failed and it passed, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm only going to show that it failed if certain things are true. So basically, I'm only going to show it failed if the hygiene score is greater than 0, which means they've had an audit, right? And I'm going to show it if the hygiene score is less than 90, right? And that's it. And then for it passed, I'm going to add a filter on there, and I'm only going to show this one if the hygiene score is greater than or equal to 90. Okay, done. And then I can save that, and it just gives a slightly different experience on edit. I'm not sure this is really something that you would use, but it does give you a slightly different experience. So again, if I now edit this, right, and I change that score to, let's say, 5, I'll get the fail, and if I change it to 95, I'll get the pass. Okay, so something you can do. I'm not necessarily a super fan of my design here, but nevertheless, it's just really illustrating a concept. Because there's something else that I'm much more interested in and worried about. And I'm going to get rid of that thing because it's just distracting me too much. So let's just go back into the page, get rid of those fields. But that will give you a basic idea of some little trick you can do. Right. So so the final thing I said this object here is a child object. It's got to look up to the parent object. So PyBatch looks up to PyRecipe. But the problem is that once you start creating your PyBatch, you're creating the PyBatch for a specific recipe. In this case, recipe PRV0000 or whatever. Now, I don't want the user to change that to a different PyBatch. Now, what I'm going to say here is a little bit controversial. So Salesforce says that if a field is required, it must always be on the page layout and it must always be editable. I actually don't agree. I think in this use case, that doesn't really work for me. So sorry, put my neck out there, but hey, here we go. So I'm just going to show you a way that you can do that and still meet all the sort of required criteria. So let's go and edit the page here. Because what you can do is you can again use this visibility stuff. So PyBatch, the thing about these is I want them there when I create the record, but I don't want them there after the record is saved. So what I've done is, so let's get the right thing. So PyBatch is the name of the record, but it's team and recipe are the two things that I'm interested in. Okay, so those two things, team and recipe. And essentially what I've done is I've created another little formula here to basically say whether records are saved or not. In this case, if it contains PB, it's saved. If it does not contain PB, it's not saved. So I could just do that with a little formula. And then I can add some visibility here because I only want to show this when it is new. So basically new batch is true. So I'm only showing that when new batch is true. And I'm only showing that when new batch is true. And that gives me, yeah, there we are, that's it, right? And then when I save that, what you'll see when I come back to the page, so I come back to the page, is that now I don't see those fields, but they are on the page. So Salesforce is quite happy, or at the object level is quite happy, whether people in Salesforce are quite happy, I'm not quite sure. But basically at the page level, it's quite happy. I can edit it, I can do all those things, but I can't, my user can't see those fields. Now, if I was building this as an app, I would almost certainly create a validation rule as well to stop people changing those fields, because even though they can't, in theory, do it through the UI, I'm never quite sure what people are going to do. So you always want to kind of belt and braces here. But certainly from the UI level, I think that's better because they can't see that field when they are editing the record. So I'm going to edit that record and I don't see the field. I can just change all the other fields, right? And also if I create a new, if I create a new one, so we're going to create a new PyBatch, you'll see those fields are visible to me. So I can search for my recipe and I can search for my team. We're going to use Paparazzi, Lady Gaga fans there. So and yeah, so that's there when I create it, but then when I save it, it's no longer visible, but it does appear up here in my compact layout because I quite like these compact layouts and using that as a way to navigate back to like the parent records like that. But obviously that's kind of a style thing. It's up to you what you do. But that's my take on it. So to be honest, that's it. So So there are my all the good things you can do with dynamic forms. Now, what I want to do now is look at some of the kind of workarounds for the things that don't work and talk about why that actually happens. So I don't know if anybody knows this already, but there is a reason why dynamic forms only work on custom objects and haven't yet been made to work on standard objects. And it's to me, a little bit strange. The reason is this. Essentially, in Salesforce, each standard object has its own product owner. So accounts and leads and opportunities and whatever, each have a different product owner. And so the dynamic forms team is having to work with each product owner to change their pages so they can have dynamic forms on their pages. And it's taken quite a while, as I understand it. What it also means is that when dynamic forms are released on standard objects, they almost certainly won't be released on every standard object at the same time. So you might have it working on leads, but not on contacts or whatever. Who knows? We look forward to it. We want the progress. We're looking forward to it happening anyway, but that's why. And then the other tricky thing is mobile. So basically, dynamic forms do not work on mobile. So if you look at the page here, sorry, I don't want to click the wrong edit thing. If you look at the page here, you'll see down at the bottom of the page, there's this funny little thing that says unsupported form factor doesn't work on a mobile device. What will happen is if you look at this on a mobile device, and we can kind of simulate it a little bit here, what you'll actually see is when you go to the details, you'll see our old friend, the page layout, appearing there. So the dynamic form doesn't appear there. We get the page layout appearing there. Okay, let's go back to the desktop view. So that's the current way it is on the mobile. Now, finally, and I guess that's dynamic forms done, but finally I'm going to show you something that people have suggested as a workaround. I'm not like a crazy fan of, but to produce a dynamic form-like experience. So you can actually create little sections with their own fields in and change the visibility of them and that kind of stuff. So let's look at how this little workaround works. So I'm going to just get rid of all the stuff on this page now. I'll leave, that doesn't matter as well. We'll get rid of everything and show you this kind of crazy workaround. So what we do here is we go into the object, okay? And if you thought using page layouts was strange, this one is crazy, right? So you come into buttons, links, and actions, and you create a new action, okay? And the action you're going to create is going to be to update a record. You give it a name, crazy stuff, right? Or a label and a name, and you can give it a success message. I don't know why, because you can never succeed to do anything. And then you save it. And then at that point, for whatever reason, you see a page layout. That was never coming, you never really saw that coming. And then you can basically drag your fields into the page layout like this, and you don't have to drag them all in, drag whatever you like in, and then you can save that. So we have now a new dynamic action. And then you go to the page, and I might need to refresh this just to make sure that it's there. Basically go to the page. And then you kind of look down here and you kind of think, well, what do I put on the page to get my dynamic action onto the page? And the thing you want to drag on there, oh, and I didn't save it, did I? Whoops. So let's get rid of all that stuff, right? The thing you want to drag on here is a thing called related record. Huh? I don't know. I don't get it, but it's called related record. And then I can get my update action, which is called, I can't even see it. I think it's because the page hasn't refreshed properly, but I had another one that I prepared anyway. So you can get that update action, you can stick it on the page like that, and then you save it. And in theory, that's slightly like a dynamic, click that one. Oh, no, I don't want to, I do want to leave. I don't want to save it, right? So it looks slightly like a dynamic page, a dynamic form, if you like, and you can use that on standard objects, and you can use that on mobile. But when you come to edit, you go back to our old friend, the standard page layout. So what it looks like on the page and what it looks like in edit are completely different, which is hopeless. Now, if you really, really wanted to, and I did have a play around with this and succeeded to do it, you could replace the standard edit action with a flow. But then by the time I've done that, it feels like I'm rewriting the whole of Salesforce. So to be honest, I'm going to wait for them to do it. But so we're looking forward to this working on standard objects. We're looking forward to it working in a mobile device. And please, can we have it working on community pages as well? But other than that, I do actually really, really like dynamic forms. And I think that they make essentially, and it looks like I've closed now, I haven't closed PowerPoint, they make the user experience significantly better, and they turn us all into UX designers, which is really, really cool. So all it remains for me to say is, first of all, I have got this idea brand new on the Idea Exchange. So if you wanted to go and vote for it, I'd be very happy if you did. And the final thing I'm going to say is thank you very much. If you've got this far, however many of you there are, if you've got this far through the talk, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for listening. And I hope you find that interesting.